Okay, people, I want to thank everybody for coming. Bezrat Hashem, the class will grow. Actually, last night I met a couple of guys that were in Rabbi Kashani Ruch's house working on a Shabbaton. The problem that they don't know where to put the Shabbaton. They don't like Netzach, but then they can't find another place. And here, I don't know, we might have a construction, so I don't know what's going to be. I wish things were very easy. Going back 20 years ago, people would die for a Shabbaton. Now you have to have conditions, you have to fulfill 100 conditions because they have too much, thank God. Anyways, one of the things that I wanted to study with you is that, this week talks about the 10 Commandments. Now, one of the things that we have actually regarding the 10 Commandments, it's something, which is a little bit, funny, it looks like. It says that after, God gave the 10 Commandments, let me see if I could just find the pasuk. Yeah, so after the 10 Commandments are given, this is by Shvi. The pasuk says, "V'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot." It says the entire Jewish nation, they were seeing the voices, right? They were hearing the voices. They were actually seeing. They were seeing the voices, which is God's voice. Now, obviously, the simple question is it possible for somebody to see voices? We don't see voices. We only hear voices. You know what I'm saying? How could you say that you see voices? If somebody says that, sounds like a retarded person. So actually, Rashi writes down that there was a very weird miracle happening then, which it is roim et hakolot roim et hanishma. They would see things that are usually heard. Now, what's the logic behind that? Why would God do it? So actually, we're going to start with a story. This story happened in Russia. The Russians didn't believe in God during the time of the communists. So there was a communist teacher that wanted to convince the kids, especially Jewish kids, that there is no God. So Gamsan says, you know what? Things that you see, they exist. You see it? What?
Was it Lenin?
No, it was a teacher.
Oh, okay. So not like them.
Yeah. So it says, you know what? You see the wall, there is a wall. You see you exist. Anybody sees God? So it says nobody sees God, so God doesn't exist. So there was a Jewish kid that it tells the kids right there, does anybody see the intellect of our teacher? Does anybody see his brains? Everybody said no. So it says teacher has no brains because we can't see his brains. Obviously, what this story brings out, there are certain things, that we don't see, but they still exist. You don't have to see to believe that it exists. So what does it mean? You see, usually when it comes to person's senses, something which is 100% existing is something that we see with our eyes. If you saw something, you can't say, well, I'm not sure. I can't convince you that you didn't see it. Because since you saw it, that's it, it's 100% existing. Things that we usually hear, we are not sure about it 100%. Maybe I heard it wrong. Maybe the guy told me this, he made a mistake. Who knows if it's true or not? So the way usually a person is, things that are physical, right? We see, there's no question about it. I see a wall, there is a wall. I see the world, there is a world. I see myself, so I exist. When it comes to godliness, we don't see God. People tell us about God, right? Your parents taught you, your teachers taught you, but you don't really see God, right? So therefore, there's never a question if I exist or not, because I see myself. The question is that does God really exist? Correct? So this is really the meaning we were discussing, that in this parasha it says, after God gave the 10 Commandments, the people were seeing the voices. And Rashi says the miracle was things that usually we hear, voices they were seeing. What does that mean? So the explanation is, the Jews at that time reached such a high level. God was such a reality, even though by us usually we don't see God. God is not something that we see with our eyes. It's what people tell us. We hear about God. That's what there's always a discussion. Is there a God? Nobody discusses, is there a world? Nobody discusses if there's United States on the map, because they see it. God, we don't see, we hear. So there's always a discussion, is there a God or not? Right after Matan Torah, after giving of the 10 Commandments, it was so clear to the Jews that God exists, because God spoke to them face to face. So they had no doubt at all that God exists. There was no question by them. So it doesn't really mean that, they saw the voices. Voice here represents spirituality, godliness, things that are usually heard. That's not so clear by us, but the Jews was 100% clear. That's what it means. Ruin et hakol, they saw the voices. Go ahead.
Ask a question?
Of course. If I don't have an answer, don't get upset.
No,
Okay.
not for that. How did they commit the sin of the golden calf if it was so obvious that God existed?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. Many commentators ask that. So, I mean, the simple answer is because they were overwhelmed when they saw Moshe is not coming back. They thought Moshe is dead, so they lost everything at that moment. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't them really. That's one of the simple answers. You know, when somebody, is such a righteous person and then he goes through a crisis, he does the most crazy thing. It's not really him. That's one of the answers given. There's other answers to it also. So, I mean, one of the lessons that we learn from these people is that, yes, there's questions, people ask, is there a God or isn't there a God? But that question only existed before the Ten Commandments were given. Really deep down, every Jew believes there is a God because since our ancestors, they actually felt it was like seeing as if they saw godliness is something very, very simple to us. And if sometimes you have a doubt, that's not really you, is your evil inclination that is trying to get to you. So that's one of the things that I learned from this week's parsha, that actually a Jew is so spiritual because he has a godly soul that he could see what is usually heard. Godliness is very clear to him. No questions asked about it. Anyways, that's number one that I want to discuss. If there's any questions, please guys ask. We're going to go to the next thing. Yes.
When did we get out of the last level of impurity to the holiest level there was? If you said we were very righteous at that time, we could
Under Matan Torah. It says that we reached the level of Adam before the sin. And then we fell back into the impurity after we made the golden calf. They actually reached Adam's level before the sin. So there's one more thing that I want to discuss with you. Could be I spoke about this before. Guys, we know unity is the greatest thing, right? If there is unity, you could accomplish infinite stuff. I'm not kidding. And we actually find the unity amongst the Jews, and we find unity amongst other nations too. But the way Rashi explains it, there's a huge difference. You see over here, when the Jews come under by Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments, so it says Vayichan Israel. It says the Jews, he encamped. It doesn't say the Jews encamped in plural. It says he, as if there is only one person. They encamped in front of the mountain. So Rashi says, why? Because till then they had fights, they had arguments. When they came to receive the Torah, they came to such a holy place that they were like one person. A language of Rashi is Ke'ish Echad. They were like one person, Belev Echad, one intention, one heart. So it wasn't so many individuals. I said all of them encamped. They were like one. And Rashi says Ke'ish Echad, like one person with one heart. Now we find last week's portion something similar too. It says when the Egyptians came to attack the Jews by the Red Sea, so it says Vayirdof Mitzrayim. It says Mitzrayim, gotta say pursued, but doesn't say the Egyptians. It says Egypt in singular. They pursued. So how come it says singular language? So Rashi says the same thing. They were all united to get the Jews and get their money back and bring the Jews back into slavery. But Rashi switches the language. Doesn't say they were like one person with one heart. It says they had one heart, like one person. So by the Jews, it says Ke'ish Echad. They're like one person and they have one heart. When it comes to the Egyptians, it says they had one goal, one heart, therefore they became like one. What's the difference? What does Rashi switch? So actually it's telling us something, very, very great, a very big difference. Guys, we have a lot of unities that are not really unity. Look at European Union, the EU, right? It's European Union. They united because not that they really love each other. I don't know if English people love the French people, or the French people love the Polish people. They're not really one. But they thought I'm not into politics. If I make a mistake, please, you could correct me. They probably thought, to stand against the United States or against the world, if they're united is better for them. It's always better to unite so we are stronger. I do know that the euro, it's even worth more than $1 most of the time. Before that, there was no such thing. Before European Union, before they became one. But you know what? That's only because, not because they really want. They want to reach a certain goal. I can't reach the goal on my own, so therefore we unite to do our goal. Once I realize that, you know what, that goal is not worth it for me, then I'm not really united. I'm going to pull out. Just like we find about Brexit, I don't even know if it ever happened or not. They just discussed it, did they do it or not? But England wanted to pull out from the European Union. Did it ever happen? It did happen, okay. So they don't use euro. They never did use euro, but they completely out. But they pulled out, you're saying, because it was a whole argument. Because they saw it's not worth it for them. So that unity is not really unity. We are really separate people, but the goals that we have makes us united. When it comes to Jewish people, again, we actually do see it. I'm going to bring a proof. It's not that our goals make us united. We are really one. What's the proof that, what's the explanation that we really want? So here we already have from the Arizal, that the Arizal explains the Jewish people, all our souls are really like one big body. Just like a person has one body. So you have the brains to the lowest part, which is the toenails, the nails of his feet. Nevertheless, they all together make one body. They're really one. They're not separate beings. So when it comes to the Jewish people, our souls really make one big, huge um, spiritual body. With that, the Arizal explains many things. Why we find, when we confess our sins, right? How come we say we sinned, we stole? Why am I talking bad about other people? I should say I stole when I confess my sins. Why do we include every other Jew? We all stole. We all committed adultery. So one of the things that Arizal says is just like one body. If a body has one of his limbs sick, it brings weakness to the entire body. Because you're not separate, you're one really. So also when a Jew sins, so then yeah, that affects all the Jews, makes them all sick. It's as if all of us did that. And the opposite is true also. When we do something good, it actually brings a blessing to the entire Jewish nation. So that's why Rashi, when it comes to the Jewish people, and I'll bring a proof to that. What's the proof to it? The proof is, honestly, guys, when you see, it doesn't matter what level of a Jew you are. Whenever you see, when a Jew has a general, when Jews are in trouble, all the Jews unite to help. Doesn't matter which country. We don't find it by other nations. I don't think if a Muslim country is in trouble, all the Arab or Muslim countries go there to help. I don't think so. Many times, when there was during the Arab upspring, Arab rising, spring, whatever it was called. So at that time, actually, Israel offered to help them. They denied. Not all the Arab countries helped each other, but Jews, again, October 7th, have united, to do something for them. Or in 2006, when there was a war that they had to go into, I don't know, Lebanon, and I think it was in Gaza at that time. Jews all over the world, they give millions of dollars for the soldiers, for the Jews in Israel. Why is that? Why we're in trouble, we all unite? Because really we are one. And most of the time we see that when a Jew is successful, we're actually all happy for him. I mean, sometimes not, but in general, that's what it is. But definitely when we're in trouble, we really care to help each other. That shows that we really, really want. That's what Rashi says about the Jews when they came in front of Mount Sinai. It says first, Ke'ish echad. They were like one person. Because they were one, they had the same goal. But the Egyptians, Rashi says the opposite. Because they had one goal, Lev Echad. What was the goal? To bring the Jews back, to get their money back. That's what united them, but that's not actual real unity. So that's the second thing that I wanted to discuss. Definitely the lesson that we learn is, guys, we are one. If we really internalize this, that we all are part of a one big spiritual body. I'm not saying we're going to become lovey-doveys, but definitely the hatred will go away. We will not have that animosity, that hatred. We know that definitely we have to control it and put a lid on it. Any questions? No, everything's clear for sure. So let's go to the next part. The next part actually is very interesting. Um, when it comes to the 10 Commandments, which is this week's Parsha, but what's going on here? Nobody's showing up. Am I getting boring or something?
No.
I know they have school. Huh?
Midterms.
Midterms?
Yeah.
Next week, there's no midterms. It's President's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, please don't go out of town. Every time there's a reason why not to be here. We got to get new blood too. The old blood graduated. They already know enough. They're pursuing their wives and husbands, trying to get married. Yeah, anyway, so we're going to actually do something else. When it comes to the 10 Commandments, There is a whole story that God wanted to give the 10 Commandments to all the nations. Where do we find that the Torah is not clear? Honestly, it's not clear that God went to other nations. But we find in the last portion of the Torah, when Moshe is talking about the greatness of the Jews, so it says Hashem, it says, let me just go to it. See Hashem, Sinai Ba. It says, V'zorach miseir lamo. It says when God gave the 10 Commandments to the Jews, he came from the land of Seir. And then it says, Hofia Mehar Paran. He showed himself from mountain of Paran. Where is mountain of Seir? Where is mountain of Paran? So whether Rashi says that mountain of Seir means the children of Esau. Esau was Isaac's brother. So God went to the children of Esau and he offered them the Torah. They asked, what does it say in the Torah? So God tells them, through the prophets, that it says, do not commit murder. It says, do not commit murder. What do you mean? Esau was a murderer. We don't want it. It comes to the children of Ishmael. That's what they lived in Paran. And they ask also, what does it say in the Torah? The answer was, God says, in the Torah, it says that you cannot steal. It says, what do you mean? Ishmael was a robber. We're not going to accept it. So the truth is, even though it says only these two nations, which are the children of Esau, which was the brother of Isaac, and the children of, brother of Yaakov, I'm sorry. And then they go to Yishmael, who was the brother of Isaac. It really went to all the other nations. The Torah only mentions the ones that were from family of Abraham, his child and grandchild, Ishmael and Esau. But it went to all the others too. When it came, for example, to the nation of Lot, Ammon and Moab, that they came from the nephew of Abraham. So they asked, what does it say in the Bible? So in the 10 Commandments. And then God answers, or the prophet answers, it says, do not commit adultery. That they couldn't accept. So when they came to the Jews, you know the joke, right? How much does it cost? Free. So they took 10. Right? You know that. Makes sense. They should have said 15, but they took 10. So the Jews didn't ask any questions. They accepted it. So now imagine, so one of the questions that they ask, imagine God would send somebody to the Nazis. What would they say? Which commandment would they refuse? So, simply not thinking into it, they would say, do not commit murder. They were killing everybody, Jews, non-Jews. They killed 18 million people. But the truth is, if you look at their ethics, they were very, very, very ethical people, supposedly. They had certain rules, the Germans, that nobody else had. If you would actually go hurt a dog in the street, you would throw a stone at the dog, there would be a fine. They had rights for human beings, they had rights for animals. So how could it be that such people became such barbarians? So the answer that actually is given, how could they have such ethical rules and at the same time do, this butchering? As one of the doctors would take pregnant women and actually cut their stomach open, like what they did in October 7th. You saw that video, right? They took a pregnant woman, they took the baby out. It was awful. You would cry. No, I saw it. No, I saw it. Actually, they showed it. It was like they're cutting this. You had to put it on WhatsApp.
I wouldn't be able to watch it.
Well, I don't know how I did it, but it's disgusting. So what happens is Dr. Joseph Mengele used to do that. He would take pregnant women, take the baby out, and make soap from it. I don't know, from the fat or something. Yeah, they have it in the museums. They were really, really butchers. But again, the best universities. You wanted to become the best doctor? Germany. Best architect, Germany. Best musician? Germany. To such an extent that the Jews in Germany thought, first be a German, then be a Jew. Because they really thought the Germans are such good people. So if they had like such, great rules and ethics, how could they become like such murderers? So the answer actually is in this week's portion. When you look at the 10 Commandments, right? The first 4 are like very, very unique. They were never there before in the world. Or at least people didn't practice it. You know that the 10 Commandments, there is 5 and 5, right? 2 tablets, 5 on one, 5 on the second one. The first 4 is basically commandments between us and God. There's only one God, do not worship idols, do not say God's name in vain, and keep the day of Shabbat. That people didn't keep before. So now you understand why God gave thunder and lightning. These were like, wow, things that never existed before. Everybody worshipped idols. Now God comes and tells the Jews, believe in one God. Who kept Shabbat before? Nobody. Whoever, didn't say God's name in vain, or they didn't care, they didn't even believe in God. Or they had different gods. But then, number 5, it says, okay, honor your parents. That's questionable. That's not between us and God. What is doing on the first tablet, different discussion. But the last 5, right? Do not commit murder, do not do kidnapping, do not commit adultery, don't give false testimony, don't covet something that belongs to somebody else. Go ahead.
How did they keep Shabbat though? Back then, like just no fire.
No, there was no painting, no building, whatever you keep
So
now.
like, how did it? So they weren't they like keeping Shabbat 24/7 almost?
Why? People built.
Like they were like building. I don't know what they.
Yeah, they did. And you're saying in the desert?
Yeah, like they just
In the
decided. that-
desert, okay, they didn't have too much work, but when they came to Israel, they had planting, plowing.
Yeah,
Of course they were.
How long after did they go to Israel?
40 years. They're
40
only in the desert 40 years, that's it.
No, but after they got the commandments.
Yeah, 40 years, 39 years, 40 years.
But that whole time they were being like enslaved by the Egyptians.
No, they came out of Egypt by Moses and they were in the desert for 40 years. Then they came into the land of Israel.
Oh, so within those 40 years they were.
They were keeping Shabbat in the desert, yeah. They didn't do carrying, you know what I'm saying? They didn't, certain, works they didn't do. They didn't
stopped
do,
on their travel.
on Shabbat, they usually didn't travel, right? They didn't go collect the mud, you know what I'm saying? Carry their vessels to go collect the mud. They didn't do those stuff. They didn't write, they didn't paint, whatever, you know. They didn't bring a piece of paper and make, a drawing.
That was like, how did the Egyptians let that keep Shabbat?
They were not by the Egyptians
That's
anymore.
what I thought. I thought they were still.
No. They came out in the desert. They were under Moshe's leadership. There was no once they came out of Egypt, the 40 years. They were not in Egypt. In Egypt, Pharaoh did not let them keep Shabbat for most part of it. Anyway, so going back, so why is there such a big deal regarding do not commit adultery? These are simple stuff. Even people that don't believe in God, they know these things are wrong. So one of the things that the answer is, if you really want person not to steal, not to commit adultery, he has to believe in God. That's why God put them together. The first 5 commandments, which is between us and God, and the first commandment is, I'm your God, don't have any idols. If you want to be a real ethical person, you have to believe in God. If you don't believe in God, you might be the most ethical person, but somehow your brains could actually get twisted and you do the most atrocities. That's exactly what the Germans were. They didn't believe in God. So to them, what I'm saying, if somebody was too old, it wasn't worth it for him to live. Just like what Obamacare wanted to do. When you get too old, part of it was, let them die without pain. Why should you do surgery for an 80-year-old guy?
Wanted to do this?
Obamacare.
In Obamacare, they found that afterwards. Imagine a guy's 80 years old, right? So you want him to live, so do surgery. I mean, how many years is going to live after he's 80? 4 years, 5 years? Why should you spend so much medical money to make him live? So they brought this whole idea that they give him medication so he dies without pain. Germans had that. If the guy is too old, why should he keep him? If he's a handicap, what's the point to keep him? According to Judaism, that's murder because God says don't kill. If you believe in God, doesn't matter who the person is. You don't do abortion either because you're killing a life. The moment you don't believe in God, you have your own ethical things, then God knows what's going to happen. Going back 100 years ago, duel was okay, right? 2 people had a fight. They would walk back to back and turn and shoot each other. That was normal. 100 years ago, abortion was murder. Now it's the opposite.
But in Compton, duels are still legal.
Okay.
I have them every night.
In Chicago too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But most of the world knows that it's murder. Right? But when it comes to abortion, now it's not murder anymore. It's your right, it's your body, you can do whatever you want. So you see, if you don't believe in God, you could actually twist ethical things. That's exactly what happened with the Germans too. Because they didn't believe in God, yes, you have to be nice to your dog, but a Jew you're allowed to kill. You're actually fulfilling your mission by killing them. It's a very famous story with Dr. Mengele that, one time he came home, he had a very small dog, and his dog was ran over by a car. When he came home, he was crying. How could somebody so cruel and so careless to run over a dog? What did he do himself the next day when he went to the concentration camp? He was killing people, butchering people. So this is exactly where the Torah comes. So again, the Nazis actually, they were so bad is because they didn't believe in Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I'm your God. So therefore they could make their own rules. And that's why the Torah puts the first 5 commandments with the second 5. When you believe in God, you will not commit murder. You believe in God, you don't do adultery. If you're going to rely on your own intellect, God knows what's going to happen. It's a very important thing to know. When I just became a rabbi, So somebody was telling me, I don't understand. You have to be afraid that God is going to punish you, so you shouldn't steal. You know what I'm saying? You should be normal enough not to steal. Yeah, I mean, normally you could be like that. But sometimes we don't even have to have faith in it. History has proven it. Nazis were the biggest example. If you don't believe in God, you will become the most, evil people on the world. That's another thing that we know, guys. We have another maybe 10 minutes, and then we're going to go tonight to Mr. What is his name? Melrosberger. He's going to be stay open. Because Hashem, next week we go to Tel Aviv. One of the things that I wanted to share with you is about you people. In this week's parsha, we learned that you guys are very important. And then your children will be even more important than you. Usually if you have something very, very expensive, right? Imagine you have something priceless. So, no, open the door. Make sure it doesn't have a gun. You have to go through a metal detector. Come inside. Do you want to go through a metal detector? No. Are you Donia? Awesome. You look like your sister, but she looks a little bit better than you. Because she's a girl, not because you're ugly. You're handsome, but she's beautiful. I hope I didn't...
No,
it was just a dumb joke.
yeah.
But you agree. Anyway, so you see what happens is, if you have, let's say, something that you got from your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and it's really valuable, and you want to give it to the next generation, you're going to give it to the most responsible. You're not going to give it to somebody that's going to throw it in the garbage, right? Something which is priceless. So over here, there is a medrash. We don't have it in the Torah clearly. The medrash discusses when God wanted to give us the Torah, the Bible, so that was very, very precious to God. And he was worried if he's going to give it to the Jews, they might put it on the bookcase and never study it. So he wanted a guarantor. I'm going to give you my holy book, right? He's going to give his godly book to the Jewish people. How can I have, who's the guarantee? Who are the guarantors that the Torah is going to go to, is going to continue to be studied? So the Medrash says a very interesting thing. First thing that the Jews answered is our fathers will study the Torah. Basically when they become like, retired, they don't have to go make a living anymore. So the parents will study Torah. So God said, no, I don't accept that. Parents, they're going to die, then nobody's going to study Torah. That's it. So then they said, you know what? Okay, we're not going to say parents, but the rabbis amongst us will study the Torah. The ones that go to yeshiva, they become religious, they're going to study the Torah. God didn't agree either until they said these words, Baneinu arevim ba'adenu. Our children are our guarantors, which means the parents took it upon themselves to teach the Torah to the next generation. When God heard that, he said, I'm ready to give you the Torah. So actually the guarantors for us to receive the Torah is the new generation. When the kids come, and the moment the child is born, I mean, my mother always told me this, I wasn't old enough, I was just born, who knows what they said in my ears. But my mother says that, the first thing that she did when babies were born, and they brought it to their mother to look at the baby, they would say the pasuk of Shema Yisrael in their ears. So the second they were born, they came next to their mom, actually told them the pasuk that, listen, Israel, our God is one. So again, and when they go to yeshiva, right, you teach them a little bit of Torah. So actually that will guarantee that Judaism will continue. There was actually a survey done. Now it's a little bit different. They're actually doing a survey. What happens? How much is the rate of intermarriage? So they actually found out, the kids that only went, to Hebrew school in the afternoon, in America, I'm saying, intermarriage was a lot because they didn't really know too much about Judaism. But kids that actually went through 12 years of Jewish school, the intermarriage was a lot less, was less than 10%. This is in the 90s. It was very little, like few percent.
What do you mean by intermarriage?
Marrying a non-Jew. I don't mean Esfahani marrying a Shirazi American marrying a South African, no, not that. Saying a Jew marrying a non-Jew. It was a lot less. So we see when we actually give the Torah to the next generation, you give them the proper education, Judaism will continue. You guys were our guarantors to receive the Torah. And again, the reason really why we are Jewish, because our parents gave it to us. And I'm saying, I don't know, you could ask your grandparents in Iran. I was a kid myself in Iran. I'm saying we were tortured as a Jew. I don't mean tortured in jails. But there was one morning that I was going to school, so there was one of our neighbors. He took a snowball and threw it at me and called me a dirty Jew. but we're proud that we're Jewish. I'm serious. I was like less than 12. Took a snowball, boom. So thank God I ducked. I don't know, you didn't have a good aiming. I don't know what happened, but it didn't hit me. But we were proud, saying our parents gave it to us. And Bezat Hashem, you guys take your Jewish studies very serious. And God willing, you're going to make so much money that you can afford sending your kids to a Jewish school and you give it to the next generation. Clear? God willing. Very, very important. Seriously. And the last thing that we're going to study is, one of these strange commandments, but actually teaches us a lesson. One of the things that this portion talks about is the building of the altar. That's where they used to bring the meat of the sacrifices to be burnt, or the fat of the sacrifices. Now, the altar is very tall. It was at least 15 to 20 feet tall. How many stories is that, guys? Two stories at least. Yeah. Now, but if for you to go take the meat and burn it on top of the altar, you have to go up. So either you have to have steps or you have to have a ramp. The Torah says you cannot build steps.
If you were just very tall.
They had to go on the ramp.
Wow.
That was the law. I mean, nobody's like that tall, 15 feet. They said Moses was 15 feet.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, he was an exception. But usually, people are 6 feet, I don't know, 5 feet or something.
Usually 6 feet around, you kill it on work. Self-esteem.
David, wasn't he like 15 feet also?
David, no. David was regular.
Who was the tallest one? Moses was the tallest?
Moses was 15 feet. No, there were people taller than him too, but it was 15 feet.
Wow.
I don't know. I entered his room, but I don't know. But he did it somehow. He managed. So, anyways, the Torah says you have to build a ramp. You can't have a step. Why can't you have steps? What's wrong with having steps? So remember, guys, in those days, they didn't really wear pants. Men had like these big robes, and the pants that they wore was like an underwear that came up to their knees. It was long shorts. That's what they used to wear. So the Torah tells us the reason why you can't have a step, because if there's steps, you have to take long steps. You have to like open your feet. You have to widen your steps. So it's as if you're revealing your nakedness on top of the stones. But if it's a ramp, you don't really make your feet that wide. So Rashi asked the question, what in the world is that? The stones have any feelings? Besides the fact they had pants anyways. They were not like naked under there. But nevertheless, okay, widening the feet is not proper. But do the stones have any brains? You know what I'm saying? The ramp was made out of stones. If it was steps, it would be made out of stones. So you're not embarrassing them. It's not like you're going in front of a human being, doing something improper. So Rashi says that's exactly what the Torah is teaching us. Even things that don't have any senses, the Torah is telling us be sensitive to them. So how much more so to living things, to trees that have a life, to animals that have a life, how much more so to human beings that have a life. So, the Torah teaches us from little small things, right? A person has brains. Thank God God gave us correct senses. So we ask, why did God give this commandment? What does the ramp or the step understand? Nothing. You're right. They don't understand anything. But that teaches me, if I have to be so careful, with stones and these things that have no feelings, how much more so I have to be careful